Hello everybody and welcome to Decision 2020. Today we have General George Washington of Virginia versus businessman John Adams of Massachusetts. Now, let's get to roll into our 7 p.m. poll closing times. Georgia is too close to call. George Washington has a lead in the state. Indiana is projected to go to George Washington. Kentucky projected to go to George Washington. South Carolina is too close to call, or too early to call. We don't have it projected up here at the moment. John Adams does have a lead in the state. I'm now getting word that it is too early to call. South Carolina too early to call. Vermont projected to go to George Washington. Virginia is being too close to call. John Adams does have a lead in the state. Here is the current electoral map. George Washington with 22 electoral votes, 0 for John Adams. It is now time for the 7:30 p.m. poll closings. North Carolina, Ohio, and West Virginia are now going to get called. North Carolina projected to go to George Washington. Ohio, too close to call. George Washington has a lead in the state. West Virginia projected to go to John Adams, his first win of the night. Virginia projected to go to George Washington. South Carolina also projected to go to George Washington. Georgia, too close to call. George Washington has a lead in the state. Here's the current electoral map. George Washington with 59 electoral votes and 5 electoral votes for John Adams. It is now 8 p.m. and the following states have poll closings. Alabama is projected to go to George Washington. Connecticut projected to go to George Washington. Delaware projected to go to George Washington. The District of Columbia projected to go to George Washington. Florida is too close to call, but it is in the favor of George Washington. Illinois, John Adams is the projected winner. Maine, John Adams is the projected winner. Maryland is projected to go to George Washington. Massachusetts projected to go to George Washington. Mississippi projected to go to George Washington, as well as Missouri. New Hampshire is too close to call. George Washington has a lead in the state. New Jersey, Oklahoma are projected to go to George Washington. Pennsylvania is too close to call. George Washington has a lead in the state, however. Rhode Island projected to go to John Adams. I think this is his second or third win of the night. Tennessee projected to go to George Washington. Ohio, too close to call. George Washington has a lead in the state. Georgia is now being projected to go... John Adams is projected to win the state of Georgia now. Last time I called, I think there was a 3-point difference. Georgia has overwhelmed... Georgia's being tilted for John Adams. There's the current electoral map. George Washington with 150 electoral votes. John Adams with 49 electoral votes. Only 5 states he's won. It is now 8:30 p.m. and the following state have poll closings. Arkansas projected to go to George Washington. Florida as well. Ohio is to join that category if George Washington wins. Pennsylvania, too close to call. George Washington has a lead in the state. New Hampshire is projected to go to George Washington. It's now 9 p.m. and the following states have poll closings. Arizona projected to go to George Washington. Colorado projected to go to John Adams. Kansas projected to go to George Washington. Louisiana projected to go to George Washington. Michigan is too close to call. George Washington has a lead in the state. Minnesota projected to go to John Adams. Nebraska projected to go to George Washington. New Mexico projected to go to George Washington. And New York is too close to call. North Dakota and South Dakota are projected to go to George Washington. Texas is too close to call, as well as Wisconsin. Wyoming is projected to go to John Adams. Here's the current electoral map. George Washington with 248 electoral votes, close to that magic 270 number, and John Adams with 71 electoral votes. The map is turning more and more like a banana right now as we're getting close to the end. It's now 10 p.m. and the following states have poll closings. Iowa, too close to call. John Adams has a lead in the state. Montana projected to go to George Washington. Nevada projected to go to George Washington. Utah projected to go to George Washington. Texas, too close to call. George Washington has a lead in the state. Wisconsin now being projected to go to George Washington. George Washington is seemingly going to win almost every state in the Rust Belt. Now we can stand by to make a major projection. Tonight at 10:32 p.m., almost 10:33, George Washington is elected the 47th President of the United States. George Washington elected the 47th President of the United States of America. Michigan is projected to go to George Washington. Pennsylvania projected to go to George Washington. New York projected to go to George Washington. The map is starting to look more like a banana now. George Washington has 338 electoral votes, John Adams 71. As of right now, the popular vote is George Washington winning 64% to John Adams 32. Now, in order for George Washington to win an electoral college landslide, he needs to win most likely California and Alaska, and that should be it, and possibly even one of the other West Coast states such as Washington and Oregon. If he can just win 3 of those states that I just named, then boom, he's already won an electoral college landslide. It seems to me that John Adams cannot make it up to at least less than 10%. 11 p.m. It's now 11 p.m. in the following states have poll closings. California projected to go to George Washington. Hawaii projected to go to George Washington. Idaho projected to go to George Washington. Oregon projected to go to John Adams. Washington is projected to go to George Washington himself. Texas projected to go to George Washington. Iowa projected to go to George Washington. Here's the current electoral map. 457 electoral votes for George Washington to 78 electoral votes to John Adams. George Washington has secured a landslide victory. The United States looks like a giant banana with pink polka dots right now, ladies and gentlemen. It is now 1 a.m. and the following states have poll closings. George Washington is projected to win the state of Alaska. Here is the final electoral map. Now let's count the states. Oregon, that's 1. Wyoming, that's 2. Colorado, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. John Adams only won 9 out of the 50 states, meaning George Washington won 41 states. Now this ain't a record. Richard Nixon had won 49 states back in 1976, I'm pretty sure, against George McGovern, excuse me. Last time we had an electoral college landslide was back in 1988 when George H.W. Bush defeated Michael Dukakis in a 448 to something vote. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed this. Well, we will be back next time for Thomas Jefferson versus James Madison and, surprise, an election tournament. Hope you guys enjoyed.